draft New Minas secondary planning strategy. Welcome everyone. We have our PAC committee here with us this evening. Councillor Windsor, Mr. Logan Morris, Ms. Kate Friars, Councillor Dick Killam, Ms. Chantal Gagnell, and Councillor June Granger, and I am Martha Armstrong, District Councillor for District 4. We have an agenda before us. Is there any amendments to the agenda from any of the members of the committee? Nothing? Can I have a motion to approve the agenda then, please? Councillor Windsor, Ms. Friars, thank you very much. All those in favor? Wonderful. With an approved agenda, this is an opportunity for any members of the committee to declare any conflict of interest. Nothing. Thank you. So our one and only topic this evening is, as I said, the draft New Minas secondary planning strategy. Our consultant, Mr. Ian Watson, a senior planner with UPLAND Planning and Design Studio, will make a presentation to outline what we're here about. And when that is concluded, that will be an opportunity for anyone in the audience who wishes to make comments or to the committee. This is an opportunity for us to hear you. We will only be listening this evening. There will be just a matter of listening. This is your evening. So I will turn the mic over to Mr. Watson. All yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, everyone. As the Chair said, my name is Ian Watson, Senior Planner with UPLAND. We've been working with the municipality and the village on this important project. So I'll get right into it. Tonight we're here to talk about Vision New Minas, or the secondary plan for the growth center of New Minas. And this would be an amendment to the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw specific to the growth center of New Minas that would provide an overall vision for development in New Minas and touch on topics like housing, commercial development, design in the community, environmental areas, and also a major component would be the expansion lands, or what I'll call them tonight is New Minas South. So on the screen there you see a border of the growth center of New Minas. It's the white line. So that includes both the established areas of New Minas north of Highway 101, the Canaan Heights subdivision, and then a large area south of the 101, which is currently mostly undeveloped, which again I'll call New Minas South. There's a bit of a project history. In 2013, the village of New Minas, and for those who don't know, the village is another level of government below the municipality, and the village boundary and the growth center boundary are roughly the same now, but not exactly the same. But as a bit of history, in 2013, the village boundary expanded south of 101 to include the expansion lands. And at that time, the municipality was going through a review of its overall planning documents, the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw. So when those were completed in 2019, the growth center boundary, which is a planning administrative boundary, was expanded to include those lands as well. However, at the time, thinking about the future of those lands was kind of a whole extra step on top of the municipal planning strategy work that was being done, and that was pushed down the road pending the completion of the overall plan. So once that plan was done in 2019, the municipality initiated this project to specifically look at a secondary plan for New Minas, and including the New Minas South lands. We were hired in early 2020 to help assist with this project. Also, a key component of this project and guiding the work, the result of what you see today came out of this working group. The municipality and the village partnered to strike a working group that would guide the day-to-day work of the project. That consisted of 2 municipal councillors, 3 village commissioners, 4 citizens appointed by the village, and 3 citizens appointed by the municipality. So, for anybody who hasn't been up to New Minas South, it's It's as I mentioned, mostly undeveloped area, successional forest, including some old growth forest in areas. There is also a major power corridor that runs through the lands, and those that area has been, of course, cleared to avoid conflict there, and is used for ATV and hiking trails, informal hiking trails. New Minas itself, if you're familiar, is fairly flat and almost at sea level, kind of along the Commercial Street area. But as you get up to Highway 101 and into the New Minas South lands, the topography of the site gets quite steep, and there are two high points right at the south end of New Minas South, and those are the lighter areas on this map here. So you have quite a hill that looks north over the Annapolis Valley. So supporting this work was a series of technical studies to help understand the background and provide some constraints around development in New Minas, the first of which was a market demand technical study, which projected demand for new residential development. It made note of the challenges with industrial lands in New Minas, the existing industrial lands, but also the broader context of the market, with the Kentville Industrial Park and Waterville, that there's a fair bit of competition for industrial lands within the region. The study also projected office and commercial demand over the next 10 years. Another key study was the utility system assessment, looked at the capacity of the drinking water, sewer, and stormwater systems. I think in short, the existing systems are fairly robust and have capacity. Any new development will require some upgrades, but nothing out of the ordinary. The one thing the study did note is that stormwater can be a challenge in New Minas. The soils are quite shallow, and so any development, particularly south of Highway 101, will need to be very mindful of stormwater runoff and designing to deal with that. There was an urban design and active transportation study, which looked at the existing character of New Minas and established some goals or objectives for the design of the community and for active transportation, walking and cycling. These were housing diversification, making active transportation convenient, a walkable commercial street, creating identity in a pride of place, and protecting natural systems and encouraging trail development. And finally, there was a transportation study, which in that case, they actually built a computer model of the transportation network in New Minas, based on the roads that are there and the existing traffic counts, projected future demand, and what that would do to the traffic system, either under standard growth or if there was a large influx of development from somewhere like New Minas South. And that report provides recommendations for improvements, access control, and does note that New Minas South can be accommodated, but will require upgrades. And that report also looked at some preliminary costing for the collector road network that would be needed for New Minas South, and that was in the realm of $27 million plus HST, land, engineering, and inflation. So all those 4 studies are available on the project website, visionnewminas.ca, if anyone wants to dig into them further. This project was also based on a number of rounds of engagement. The first one of those looked very much at your vision for the future as a community. So we sent flyers to every residential address in New Minas, had an online launch event, surveys, an online mapping tool, stakeholder interviews. And we heard some really key themes that came through again and again in the different feedback we received. One was a need for affordability, both in housing and also in business, affordable spaces to have businesses. An appreciation for the existing active transportation and open space available in New Minas, as well as a desire for more and better connectivity between those. A need to make sure we consider accessibility and inclusion in any future for New Minas, and a strong desire to see Commercial Street redeveloped and reused and reinvested in as the heart of New Minas. We asked people to rank a number of priorities, and I won't go through them individually, but there are there on the screen. You know, business and economic development high, and you can see again sidewalks, trails, cycling, that kind of thing, quite high on people's priorities. So we took all that, the technical studies, the background engagement, and we developed a summary and scenarios report, looking at some 3 conceptual scenarios for development in New Minas, kind of high or low, medium, high growth, and what that would mean in terms of how many people you could accommodate and the land use mix. And we had this was in kind of the depths of COVID, or the depths of the opening up of COVID, after COVID. So we had small group workshops to review those, the draft guiding principles and key directions, as well as those development scenarios. And what we heard a lot through that phase of engagement was a desire to encourage diverse housing and higher densities of housing, particularly with an aim towards affordability. Again, that comes through. On the commercial development side, again, that common thread of reinvesting and revitalizing Commercial Street. There was a worry in looking at the scenarios for New Minas South that any high level of commercial development risked undercutting what exists along Commercial Street and kind of splitting the commercial gravity of New Minas, but also a desire for new businesses in New Minas. We also heard a lot about amenities. People value and want more green space, recreation opportunities, and schools. And connectivity. The Harvest Moon trail runs through New Minas, but isn't always easy to get to, or is not apparent where it's to get on the trail. There are neighborhoods in New Minas where there's opportunities to make it easy to get between them by foot or by bike or by wheel. And then also a recognition that if New Minas South is to develop, it needs to be well connected to the existing areas of New Minas, so that it is an integral part of the community and not seen as separate. And finally, we heard a lot about the environment, protecting natural spaces, particularly the ravines. There's the Eldrick Brook ravine on the west side of New Minas, bordering Kentville. As well, when you get into New Minas South, there are a number of ravines with old growth hemlock in them that are seen as important habitats and important natural environments that should be protected. And finally, we developed a draft secondary plan and took that out through a third round of engagement with a survey, online mapping tool, a series of workshops, and letting the landowners in New Minas South know about the plan, and then notifying stakeholders as well. So we heard a lot of good support for the approach to Commercial Street and the planning approach to the County Fair Mall, which I'll go through tonight. And people liked about the draft, the space it made for parks and trails, the consideration for pedestrians in the plan, the mixing of uses and the diversity of uses that are proposed for New Minas. The protections for the ravines, and the diverse supply of housing that the draft plan would enable. There were some concerns about the draft in terms of the amount of commercial space and its potential impact on what exists along Commercial Street. In that version of the draft, there were higher densities of residential development backing on existing residential areas, and that's something that's been adjusted in the version you'll see before you tonight. There was worries about congestion, from additional development, and some comments on the parks that were proposed. And again, there's been some adjustments to that in the version you'll see tonight. So that's we then took that back to the working group and refined the draft to the kind of final draft that's here before you tonight out of the working group, and that's what I'm going to go into now. So the draft secondary plan has I think it's 4 guiding principles, and then each of those has a series of key directions. I won't read the individual key directions, but the guiding principles are a place for people, so that deals with things like making sure people have a place to live, that there's diverse opportunities to get around the community and that the community is well connected. The second is green living, making sure that we're protecting the environment in the ways we do development, and that our approach to development is environmentally sensitive and sustainable. And then also that we give people access to green. A regional destination with a strong business community. New Minas is the shopping center of the Annapolis Valley, and continuing to support that. Reinvestment again and redevelopment along Commercial Street, and also being a destination for recreation. And finally, thoughtful development and sustainable services. So, as new development happens, we need to make sure that it's both environmentally but also financially sustainable. You go back to those roads, and that's a significant cost. We want to make the most of that. We want to do it logically and make sure that development is paying for itself as it happens. So, that brings us into the contents of the plan itself. I've broken it down kind of by theme tonight, rather than necessarily, chronologically or orderly through the document itself. So one of the first major themes where the draft secondary plan would have an effect is development along Commercial Street. So we heard again and again in the engagement a desire to reinvest and reinvent Commercial Street and make it a place for people, a place where it's comfortable to be, not just in a car, but maybe to walk, to sit, and to feel like you're in a bit of a destination. So some of the ways the draft secondary plan aims to achieve that is by reducing minimum front yards, so that's the distance between a main building and the front lot line, reducing how far a building has to be from that lot line, allowing them to come closer to the street, and then going beyond that and implementing a maximum front yard of 50 feet to require at least one of the main buildings on the lot to be close to Commercial Street, to give that sense of a little more urban, a little more destination Main Street type feel. And for now, that 50 feet's not from the edge of the pavement, it's from the property line. And for context, that's like the new RCMP building or Jordan's Furnishings are about 50 feet. So that allows room for 2 lanes of parking as well as a travel lane in between them, but still keeps those buildings relatively close to the street. A minimum building height of 2 stories, again, to create that sense of density and that sense of place. A minimum ground floor height, creating flexibility for future use of buildings, so they can be converted easily from one business to another. Increasing the maximum building height. So currently in New Minas, the maximum building height is 55 feet. The draft increases that to 65. This aligns, there's recent updates to the building code that allow wood frame construction up to 6 stories. That's obviously not a very cheap option right now with the way building materials are, but traditionally it's a cheaper way of doing things and allows for affordable density. So that aligns with that. However, that it does have an impact on the street and on the feel of the community. So the draft implements a step back requirement for the upper floors, and I'll illustrate that in a second. So here's an example, of the difference of having a building close to the street versus further back, and what that does to the feel as a pedestrian. It feels more enclosed, it feels more Main Streety, if that's a word. And here, so this is a building at the previous maximum of 55 feet, and here would be under the proposed draft. It increases the floor, but there's a step back, a minimum step back, where the upper floors have to be set back from the front. And what that does is when you're at when you're at street level and you're looking up at that building, the higher floors recede kind of into the distance, and you don't notice them as much, and it reduces some of that impact. Another related topic, I think, to Commercial Street, and one that's particularly important in New Minas, is the County Fair Mall. It's obviously a major site, major corner, and I don't think there's any secret that the future as an enclosed mall is probably not there. So there will be redevelopment at some point in the future. And the plan wants to have some guidance over how that happens. So the draft plan puts this site in the C6 zone, which would allow redevelopment by development agreement. So there would be an additional, a negotiated process to redevelop that site. And there's some policy requirements as part of that. One is to have good pedestrian connections through the site. One is, for those who don't know, there's actually a stream that runs under the site, and it's currently contained within a culvert, but as storms are getting more intense, that infrastructure is not necessarily sized to accommodate that. So the policy requires at least half the stream to be daylighted, and this provides stormwater benefits as well as a potential for amenity there, having a stream on the site. And that development there would have to have a high standard of landscape design and urban design. Kind of the trade-off of this is, that's kind of a imposition on the landowner a little bit. So the trade-off is the policy also enables, higher densities here. Mixed-use development really encourages good use of this site. And here's just an example. This is a kind of a growing trend around the world, daylighting streams. This is an example from Dartmouth where the Sawmill River had been long buried since the 70s and was recently daylighted, and it's got an important stormwater function with the slope of the road, or slope of the hill there, but also is a really beautiful amenity for the community. So that's kind of, one of the those are the two major pieces in the established areas of New Minas, but of course the other major piece of all of this is New Minas South. It's greenfield lands, which means it's undeveloped, there's no infrastructure there. So one of the biggest challenges with developing New Minas South is going to be that infrastructure piece. And it's really important that that infrastructure happens cohesively, that roads are planned on a large scale to make sure there's connections, that piping is planned on a large scale to make sure that the pipes downstream are big enough to deal with the development upstream. So, really the most appropriate tool to do this is the development agreement again. So development in New Minas South would be done by development agreement, and it requires the participation of at least 75%, landowners representing at least 75% of the land area within a phase. And that allows, that comprehensive planning and that thoughtful design of servicing. And there's policies in there that require compliance with the urban structure, which I'll show. Comprehensive servicing plans, that's what we really want to get at, is thinking about that servicing very carefully, and particularly stormwater management. The policies require a high level of connectivity within and between neighborhoods. There's an active transportation map with high-level connections that development needs to comply with, and there's major parks that would need to be established. It also gives the village a chance to review the proposal and see if there's any infrastructure needs, like a new water tower, and make sure lands are set aside for those. So the draft secondary plan has what we call an urban structure map. These are the three phases. They don't have to happen in any particular order, but each phase would be planned comprehensively together. And they're basically broken down. These dark green colors are the ravines that exist up there, and those are a natural break point in terms of servicing and in terms of connectivity and that kind of thing. So, the details of how a neighborhood would be laid out and exactly what mix of land uses would be up to the proponent to propose and to be negotiated through the development agreement. But the expectation would be that in the light yellow areas, it would be lower density residential, 1, 2, 3, 4 units kind of thing, small multi-unit buildings. The kind of reddish color there would be higher density mixed use, multi-unit buildings, as well as some small commercial. Highway commercial would be dedicated for uses like hotels, gas stations, restaurants, that kind of thing that serve the traveling public at the highway interchange. That light pink is intended for general commercial, very similar to what's along Commercial Street. And then the dark green is open space environment. That's a protective zone that doesn't allow any development other than things like conservation and trails. And that's, again, protecting those ravines from development and making sure that they're an important feature both naturally and potentially for recreation in New Minas South. And then there's two major components, the light green, which are parks. This point here is a very high point. It's one of the highest points in the area. It's quite gorgeous. It's old forest. There's a real opportunity there for a nature-focused park, and then as well as a view park at the interchange. And certainly these wouldn't be all the parks. There'd be neighborhood scale, your little tot lot park playgrounds kind of throughout neighborhoods. But these are major features that would be expected to be included in any development. There's an active transportation map that has linkages that would be expected as new development happen, and it also has some guide to the municipality and the village for future investments in the areas where infrastructure is already developed. There's a road network map. Again, as development happens, it wouldn't need to be exactly like this, but it's expected that the road network would roughly comply with this layout. Active transportation would comply with that map. Also on the topic of active transportation, there's a requirement for bicycle parking for commercial uses in the draft secondary plan, as well as requiring sidewalks on both sides of new roads. And then one kind of other important topic is well fields. New Minas gets its water from a series of drilled wells down near the Cornwallis River, and those wells have land use controls placed around them to protect the types of uses that can happen because we don't want to contaminate those wells. The challenge with those is historically they have limited multi-unit development along Commercial Street because historically such uses were developed with large oil tanks, for central heating. They were a potential risk, but that's changed. That's not the approach anymore. And we've heard that a development agreement requirement has been a barrier to people developing residential development along Commercial Street. So we heard that challenge. We know the situation's changed, and so we've removed that requirement for a development agreement for multi-unit dwellings in the well fields. There was requests for other changes to the well fields to allow other types of uses, but we don't have the professional expertise to evaluate that and to make a good call on that. So, as the village drills new wells, there will be a need to do new source water protection plans, and if those experts say that it's appropriate to change what's permitted, then at that time there's policy support to do that. And finally, the draft secondary plan makes some minor adjustments to zoning. There's some industrially zoned properties that can't be developed for industrial because of the well field restrictions. So they're rezoned, for example, to residential to enable them to be developed, and some tweaks to the growth center boundary to better align it with natural features. So that, in essence, is the highlights, and I'll turn it back to you because tonight's to hear from you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. So at this time, we're going to open the podium for comments from our public. I'll ask that you come down individually. When you get to the podium, if you're wearing a mask, you can take it off then. If you could give us your name and your address, and I guess that's it. It's open for you. Don't everybody jump up at once.
Hi, how you
Hi
doing
there.
tonight? My name is Bruce Whalen, 135, 141 Crescent Drive, New Minas. I've been a resident of New Minas for 59 years. I guess the reason I'm here tonight is the water issue with the new development across the 101. It seems like a lot of our water is coming from the 101. It's ending up down in the bottom where I am. There's issues at the Superstore, at the bottom of, if you go up Pierre Drive and go to the top, you'll find a big culvert up at the very top, Millens. That's always been a big issue, and that's a runway that, of water that comes down through from the new development. It comes down through the middle of the subdivision, through the, it must be underground now because it used to be a brook when I was a young feller. It comes down through, it goes underneath the senior citizens. It goes to the superstore, across the street, to Manor House, behind Manor House, and it ends up in my backyard. And I'm on the corner of Barron and Crescent. Down at the bottom of Barron Street, it ends up down the bottom of Barron Street, and then it goes underneath the road, and it heads for the Cornwallis River, which everything happens. As of right now, it's not working well. Since they paved Crescent Drive, where I live, I am getting water off Commercial Street coming in down from Saunders Tartan and Gift Shop, coming down. Me and Mr. Windsor have looked at it. Mr. Windsor, Mr. Conrad, Mr. Slack, and Mr. Irving all looked at what is going on my property. It's on the front of my property, and it's in the back of my property, in the very, very back end of my property. I guess the issue I have here tonight is if we open up across the 101, which I think is a great idea. I want New Minas to grow. Like I said, been here 59 years. I love to see New Minas growing. Yes, there's a lot of perks that come with New Minas growing, and I could speak all night about that. But as of right now, there's a water issue, and the gentleman talked about, yeah, we really got to look at what's going on down in the lower end before we get up there and start bringing all the water up across the 101 down to the bottom. And I have a very small issue. Jim and I looked at it several times. I'd like for each and every one of you to come to Donnie Saunders Tartan and Gift Shop, and see what they did in front of my property. They dug a hole and dug a ditch. They said nobody walks on this street, there's no sidewalk. People have to walk on the street to get down the street. They have to jump into the ditch to get out of the way of the cars. It was poorly done, wasn't a culvert, it was just dig a hole. And when you get a chance, just pull into Donnie's parking lot there and have a look at it. It comes down across the front of my two properties, it goes around the corner, and then it dumps into the back of my properties. And then behind the Manor House, we have a culvert. I would say I could probably stand in the culvert. And the last time I was over, and I don't think it has changed, the last time I was over and looked at that culvert, I could probably stand into it, so it's 5 or 6 feet tall. There's probably about this much left on the top of it. It's full. So that's where the water comes from, the superstore. Initially coming from the 101, at the end of the, I'm getting my roads mixed up here now. We have an issue at the intersection. A lot of the water comes from the parking lot from Tim Hortons. It's just that we have a water issue, a runoff, and with the way that the weather is changing, and over the next 10 years, is what you're looking at, and we get these downpours, we're really going to have a problem. Thank you for your time.
And I know that the two ladies on either side of me were furiously writing while you were talking, so, and hopefully the village is listening too. Thank you. Next.
Good evening. My name is Tim Bowder. I live on 3 Align Street in Wolfville, but I'm actually here tonight to represent the Village Commission. I'm the clerk treasurer for the Village of New Minas. And first, on a personal note, I remember probably 2.5 years ago, the start of this process, and I was the municipal engineer here at the county. So it's really nice to see the progress that's been made, and I really look forward to being involved on the implementation and future construction aspect of this important project. So the Village Commission asked me to make a few comments on their behalf. And first of all, I'd like to thank the municipality for all of the work and progress that has been made on the draft New Minas secondary planning strategy. The Commission is really excited for the growth and the opportunity that this new SPS will open up for our community. And that would be both for the existing developed corridor as well as the lands to the south of the 101, which up to now have been in the holding zone. We are also grateful for all of the contributions made by municipal staff, as well as consultants, working group and committee members, volunteers, and members of the public towards this project. The Commission is also grateful that the bonus zoning provisions have been removed from the draft SPS. And although the August 9th motion to rescind was not necessary, the Commission does endorse the 17 points that were outlined in the rationale for rescinding. And we are hopeful that bonus zoning provisions will not be considered as future amendments to the SPS. The Commission also asked me to raise 2 additional items for consideration before the draft SPS is formally adopted. The first one has to do with the maximum front/flankage setback of 50 feet. So certainly there were different opinions on the Commission, but what we can agree with as a whole is that the Commission would like to ensure that the maximum front setback of 50 feet will not lead to unintended aesthetic impacts along Commercial Street. For example, if a building was oriented to accommodate parking on one side, the kind of back of the building would be visible to oncoming traffic. So the question is there additional wording that could be incorporated into the SPS to outline aesthetic requirements for all building sides visible from Commercial Street? And the Commission felt that was important, especially if the buildings would move closer to the street itself. The other point for consideration has to do with the requirement to daylight at least 600 feet of stream at the County Fair Mall site. And the Commission feels that this requirement limits the future redevelopment of the site. We have received a letter from Crombie, and they're the property owners, and they've asked me to share that with the municipality, so I have copies of that letter. Most times of the year, the flow through the existing culvert is very low to no flow. However, during heavy rainfall events, and particularly in combination with spring snowmelt, the flow through the existing culvert can be substantial. Daylighting the culvert would increase the risk for flooding and erosion during those high runoff events, while conversely being unsightly during the times when there's no flow. An underground pipe system, which would be designed as part of an updated stormwater management plan, and there would also be requirements for legal easements to be put in place, which I don't think are there now. The Commission feels that such a system would provide a more suitable solution for both conditions, the heavy rainfall events and the dry events, which is the majority of the year. So I would like to thank you for the opportunity to participate in this process and for your consideration in these matters on behalf of the village.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Are there any further comments? If not, I guess we will conclude our agenda for this evening, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Councillor Killam, Councillor Granger, thank you very much. All those in favor?
May I ask
Thank you.
a question related to process, and it may be related to
Just-
staff, not the project at
just-
all. The next meeting.
I'm going to turn your mic on, Councillor
Okay.
Windsor.
The next meeting of PAC, would we be back here with this item? Just for the information of those in the audience. Is that the intent right now? Thank you.
Yep, that's the plan.
Yep,
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion to adjourn on the floor. If there's no one against that, all those in favor? I think we did that already, but we'll do it again. Okay. I appreciate everyone coming this evening. Thank you all.